And yeah, my stepdad got worse and worse. We were having standoffs at the property with the RCMP, and he's in the bushes, high out of his tree with a gun. And, me and my mom would end up going to a woman's shelter, and, only to come back, right? You get stuck in that cycle of abuse, if you will. And so during those years, I had a hard time expressing myself, getting along with others. I was athletic, that was one thing, but I was aggressive. And yeah, it was unfortunate. But through a series of events, I think I was about 10 and a half, we were at the mall, me and my step-grandma. She was my one reprieve, that every once in a while when I was with her, I would get a few things I normally wouldn't. We kind of were impoverished. We didn't have much. And so when I was with my step-grandma, she would buy me a couple things and Skittles and a few treats that I normally wouldn't get. So I appreciated my time with her. But I was with my grandma at a local mall. And as we're walking down the mall, this guy starts staring at me. And now I don't even know what my real father looks like. I haven't seen him since I was little. And this guy's staring at me, and I'm staring at him. And anyway, he's with a girl, and she runs over to me, and she's like, is this boy's name Max? And my grandma's like, yeah. She's like, this is his father. And so anyway, we exchanged some information and phone numbers. And shortly after, about 2 weeks later, he'd kidnapped me. And we'd go to social services. We'd explain how I was being abused. And they would give my dad like temporary guardianship. Little did I know at the time, I was 10 and a half, turning 11, my dad was a pretty big gangster, if you will. He was in the sex trafficking industry, which we didn't call it that back then. He was a pimp. He had prostitutes. He ran escort agencies, put girls on the street. The house was pretty much a brothel. I had 2 girls in my bedroom. People were walking around the house naked. If that wasn't enough, my dad was also a pornographer. He collected a lot of pornography, and he also shot and produced pornography. So you could imagine I went from one situation of isolation, physical abuse, mental, emotional abuse, some sexual abuse, exposure from my stepdad, and obviously earlier on, and activities you get involved in, when you're unsupervised with other kids and stuff like that. At my dad's house, I'd be further exposed to things very sexually orientated that would mess me up for many years, would bring shame and just the way you would judge yourself and judge other people. Obviously, my perspective towards women would start to change. Initially, at that age, I thought I would kill guys like my dad, for hurting people. But little do you know, you are taking it all in, and you're actually going to become what you're surrounded by. Your environment is going to influence you. And so some years later, I would partake in the exact same things as my dad. But I would stay with my dad for a short period of time. I'd end up running away. Social services would get involved. I would end up coming back to my dad's house. I'd break into his house and cause damage. I was so upset, just the way I was being treated. Nobody knew what was going on. I didn't know how to say anything. And so when social services got involved, I had a choice. I could either become what's called a ward of the government, which the government would take custody of me, or I could go back into custody with my dad. And I was so hungry for change and just normality, not knowing what that was, that I chose to go to social services. And so with that, for the next, foreseeable future, from the ages of 12 to about 20 years old, it would be a series of foster homes, group homes, and then jail, young offender, and then it would go into adult. In total, I'd serve about 4.5 years. And it would start as little things. You'd pull a fire alarm, you'd steal something simple. You're just looking for attention. Will somebody see me? You get into your first group home, you meet other guys just like you. They're a little bit older, they're influential. And so you cling to that, right? You're looking for love, you're looking for acceptance. And so one thing leads to another. You end up in jail. You finally got the discipline you need. You're eating consistently. You're getting recognized. It's a place to grow and get strong and figure out if you're a man. And so in those types of settings, a lot of my abuse came out, and I became aggressive, and I became a bit of a bully, and yeah, just not the nicest version of myself. But as I related earlier, it was here that I would get my first doses or understanding of who God was. In all places, it would be in a jail that God would start the nurturing process for me. And, there's a lot of stories I could share, obviously, but I was caught up in a lot of violence, gangs, drugs, orgies, craziness, that world brings, those things that you're exposed to. And, I'd often suffer the consequences for those things, not only by, going to a jail and losing my freedom, but also just mentally and emotionally. You're working through a lot of things. You're not supported. I didn't have the support of my parents at this time. And so you're trying to figure out life all by yourself, through social workers or otherwise. It was at about the age of 16, 17, I'm in prison. My father is now gone to prison. He'd end up serving 5 years in the penitentiary. But how I would talk to my dad is he would go to his chaplain in his jail. I would go to the chaplain in my jail, and we'd take a phone call. And that's how I got to learn and know more about my dad. He would eventually get out and change his life around a little bit. He unfortunately would die prematurely through the choices that he made along the way. But where there was a saving grace for me, where there wasn't for some of my friends, is that at about the age of 18, where guys that I was raised with have either been murdered, they're going to jail, they're going to the penitentiary for 5, 10, 20 years, depending on what they've done. They're dangerous offenders, they're all kinds of crazy. I had an opportunity when I finally got out at the age of 20, I got scouted to be a fashion model. And I didn't know anything about fashion or anything like that. I was busy being a bad guy or playing sports or whatever, obviously in and out of the system. But through a series of events, I would have the opportunity to start to travel. So I'd go to Milan, I'd go to Paris, I'd end up on billboards and magazines and doing all kinds of crazy things in that world. But during the initial part of that journey, I was now, 21 years old, 22 years old. I just had my son, and out of wedlock, and now I'm traveling, and he's with his mother. And as I'm traveling, God works through people. And my best friend had just given his life to the Lord, and he called me, and he said, "Hey, Maxwell, I don't think you're supposed to go to Paris." I was in Montreal at the time. He said, "I think you're supposed to come back to Toronto." And so, not knowing what I was walking into, I went back to Toronto, and a bunch of believers, young believers, that really loved the Lord, got around me, rallied around me. One guy in particular, Jermaine, awesome brother in the faith. Yeah, these guys rallied around me. I gave my life to the Lord. That's where I started to take it a little bit more serious. I was baptized in an almost all black church, and I just remember that day. It was profound. It was. I invited models and people from the industry and bouncers and gangsters and dealers and people I was dealing to the church. And in my previous life, I had done every drug under the sun. But the feeling I had when I was in the basement, in the chamber area, waiting to be baptized was absolutely amazing. A friend went before me to Amazing Grace. I came out to my song, and I thought I was going to hold my composure. But when I seen everybody, I just broke down crying, and I said, "Guys, you got to know how real this really is. God is real. He's alive and well. And if he can see me, he can see you. If he can take a guy like me, there's a saying in the Bible where Paul's like, I'm the chief of sinners. But man, when I look at my life and the sins I committed and the shame I walked around with and the disbelief and, just all these holes in my heart, and then to meet the living God, to meet his son, Jesus, to meet Holy Spirit that comes and dwells inside of you when you give your life to the Lord and fills your cup. and just starts transforming you. It doesn't happen overnight. For some people, it happens quicker. For me, that's going to be the second part of my testimony, where it wasn't a clean cut. It was like I came to this big mountain like Mount Everest to climb it, and I came overpacked. I came with too many things, and as I started to climb the mountain, I recognized that I wouldn't be able to take all my baggage with me. I would have to start to relinquish things. And I would later learn about like the iniquities of the forefathers, like why do we do the things we do? You know, and it's like my dad did that, my grandpa did that, he talked like that or had a habit or whatever the case may be. And so you learn about the spiritual realm as you start to journey with the Lord, and how significant it is, just as significant, if not more, as the physical realm. And so it took me a while to learn these things, but to look back now, I sometimes feel like Mowgli in the jungle. I was raised by wild animals, if you will, and unsupervised, and but yet God's hand was on me. Even when I look at the abuse and things that took place, I can still see clearly God's hand was on me. And even with social workers, or in jail with guards, or with volunteers, I've always had a favor somehow. God safeguarded me. There's many times I could have been killed, kidnapped. A lot of guys wanted to take me out. You know, I had a chip on my shoulder, and so I could have easily been taken out many, many times. And I can see how God was looking out for me. And I remember meeting certain people later on, like lawyers and stuff like that. And they'd be like, Bracey, you know, we heard you were doing well. And if there was one guy we thought could make it, it was you. And so I really appreciated that. And so I'm here to testify that God is absolutely good. And if he can do it for me, he can do it for you, wherever you may be at today. If you don't know the Lord, I hope you heard something in my testimony that would inspire and create faith in you. You know, the Bible says that God comes to seek and save that which is lost. So if you're lost today and you're looking to be found, just say, Jesus, what about me? You found Maxwell, can you find me? Will you show up in my life today? And all you need to do is call out Jesus, and he will reveal himself. And so that's absolutely precious. It's the most meaningful thing to this life, is to find out why you're here. And I'm here to encourage you that you're here on purpose, that you're a promise, that God's good, that he's got good plans for you. And it doesn't matter, you know, if you did the hurting or if you were hurt. One thing that I can give you is the power of forgiveness. When I think about, you know, my stepfather and the things he did to me, he beat me like an animal. He did all kinds of awful things, but you know what was powerful is that after giving my life to the Lord, I was able to fully forgive him. And we had a very special encounter. I took my son with me. He was young at the time. He was only 4 years old, so he wouldn't fully mentally grasp what was taking place, but I brought him with me because spiritually I wanted it to resonate with my son that it is possible to forgive. And, you know, at this time, my stepdad didn't ask for forgiveness. He might not even thought what he did was totally wrong, but I knew that I had to forgive. And the Bible defines that. If we're not able to forgive, how can we be forgiven? And so when I chose to forgive my stepdad, I never, ever had an ill thought about him again. And so that's the power of forgiveness. It allows you to move on. You're no longer the prisoner. And so it's absolutely profound. I was able to do the same thing with my biological father in a different capacity. I was able to write him a letter. Would he fully grasp it before he died? I don't know. But nonetheless, I was able to do that. And so today I'm a free man. And so I'm here to encourage you that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is absolute freedom. And so in that, because this is a challenge, this Testify challenge, Testify Now, I'm going to challenge the following people to testify. And why I'm challenging you is because I know you absolutely love the Lord, and he's done impactful things with you, through you, and to